Hello and welcome to Team SI's Midday Roast, our weekly Facebook Live cast and podcast where we discuss or share with you some of the conversations we have around the office with each other about different marketing trends that we see on the horizon and some of the challenges they present. Today I have a very special guest. We have our founder and CEO, Mr. Tim Whitley, here with us.
I don't know about special, but yeah.
and today we're going to talk about TraDigital.
Yes, and so a lot of people, well, not anymore, because they're so used to that term, especially with our clients, your clients, etc. But a lot of people, I remember going on the speaking circuit in 2012, talking about TraDigital, and everybody was like, "What does that mean?" And then once you explained it about mixing in traditional with digital, everybody's like, "Oh, TraDigital, it's cute on, play on terms." And actually, somebody in our PR department is the one who kind of came up with that. But yeah, so that's where it all started in 2012, with just forming that TraDigital language, so that people understood that it's not just digital and it's not just traditional. Because still, fast forwarding from 2012 into 2018. There is still a huge divide and a wall between digital and traditional about what you do and what you shouldn't do, and just 100% digital or 100% traditional. The mixology isn't correct.
Yeah, a lot of clients always ask me, well, what percentage do I need to put in the traditional basket? What percentage do I need to put in the digital basket? And they really just see these two things. Either starting to see them, blended more in as one thing, but I think, it's been drilled in their head for a long time.
Well, and there's one example that you have, and we don't have to say the client name, but specifically that we just brought on recently, asked for us specifically for a digital proposal.
Right.
And they thought they were going to be a digital client only, but...
And they thought, well, okay, so y'all handle the digital portion, and I think they wanted a recommendation of like, well, who would you want to partner with, for a traditional agency? And said, we don't need to partner with anybody. We're not a digital agency, we're a TraDigital agency, and what we create is a strategy that encompasses everything and then filters down in a very consistent, clean, well-branded manner, and gathers all leads from all sources and delivers those to the clients. So I want to get into a little bit more on kind of breaking the mindset of what is digital, TraDigital, because I think you explained it in a really good way about screens and all the different mediums. But first, I want to remind everybody to share this podcast or share this Facebook live cast,
which it is now.
Now
it will be a podcast.
It will be a podcast later with your friends and followers on social media. So just if you're seeing it now, just go to the post, hit share, and if you have any comments or questions, I'll leave those in the comment section, and we will answer those here live on the air.
Live or later on. When this, during live, a lot of people are on their lunch break, but during, over a week, we'll get thousands of views on this this one video. So Grace, which handles all of our internal PR and whiz-bang of seminars and all this other stuff, she's always looking at the stuff and looking at questions and stuff. So just saying that in case you watch this later on.
Absolutely. Thank you for reminding us.
Yeah.
Help the viewers right now understand, that TraDigital kind of breaks down the classical definition of what is, television and radio, because people still see like, oh, that's all traditional. That's not digital. But in fact, when you look at all the different, audio and video sources the consumer doesn't make a differentiation. Doesn't make that difference in their head when they're watching Netflix or whatnot.
So what's really funny is, we talked about a lot about this years ago and sent people on a speaking circuit and started talking about TraDigital and, me being a keynote speaker and all this other stuff. But what has been really interesting with this year and telling people, it's becoming very much harder for research firms to literally ask Pittman, how much television do you watch? And then how much digital television do you watch? And the person on the other side on a telephone survey or whatever it may be like, what the heck are they talking about? Like, I just watch Netflix, Hulu, and the local news at 6. I don't know the difference between those. But it's really become true as we're tracking leads from various sources in a TraDigital format, and we know Pittman was brought in via a pre-roll on a CNN news story, but on the line when we record the phone call, the person literally says, "No, I saw you on television." Well, that's inaccurate. It was actually a CNN pre-roll,
Right.
But it's just video.
And I
Is
think
it not? It's just video.
It's video.
And they see video on mobile, on desktop, on tablet, on laptops, on the big TVs from 143 inches down to 19 inches. So
I have a client who they are an HVAC client, and they had always advertised on broadcast television, on cable, and we're trying to get into more digital video as well. And we created a full TraDigital platform, a marketing platform for them. And what they found was people started telling them, "Man, you're on TV all the time. You're getting as bad as their competition, which is much bigger."
yeah.
And they were like, "Oh, well, we're actually just doing these small cable TV buys. We're not actually on the big broadcast networks." But it felt like they were, and it created this kind of seeing you everywhere effect, because people were seeing them when they tuned into HGTV, and then they would see them on YouTube, and then see them on a Facebook video.
Yeah, and then the CNN or whatever the platform
Yeah.
may be. It's wherever your audience is, the targeted audience that you need to hit, and then it's wherever they work and play in a safe environment, online or in programming, and then it's at the right frequency, because like what you just said about frequency, in advertising from the 1880s all the way from today, it still all depends on frequency. And today, to get out of a cluttered environment, it just takes more and more of that frequency, exactly what you just said. And the frequency doesn't have to just come from one channel anymore. It's a mixture of channels that has the exact same message, but can declutter itself, because it's in environments where the competition is not.
And it's relevant to that person in real time.
Yeah.
And I think the other side of that you're kind of mentioning is the data, and how important the data is in a TraDigital marketing strategy, as opposed to a classical traditional digital mindset.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about how data drives a TraDigital campaign, kind of from a ground up, and then it turns into what you see.
So really, this developed this mindset of really going the data-driven approach with the TraDigital approach. Really came into play with a lot of our agriculture and equipment dealers that we are very large in and very well known in, and all across the United States and Canada.
Over 400 now. Is that correct? Or it's
over 500-ish.
Over 500. Wow.
But you got the whole process, and the whole team that's led by Karen is that everything is determined by data. So I'll get asked, even though I say that I can't necessarily answer the question about the buckets, about the percentages of buckets, I'll literally say that 5 times in a keynote speak, and then somebody will raise their hand and somebody will literally ask, "Okay, so what's your average percentage?" And I'm like, "Oh, you can't do that." And so how that is all developed is data determines everything. So we don't do any kind of planning until we receive the data back from the dealer. And this is any client, any industry, any vertical, whatever you want to call it, from HVAC to data miners to equipment to automotive. But data determines where we should be. And so where we start with this is we get a lot of information from the prospective client, which is, it could be their Google Analytics, their CRM information. It could be all the first-party data that you have in-house of saying where your customers are, what are the lookalikes, all of that stuff. And then we start mapping that stuff out. And then later on, actually, that's being tied to a blog, it really writes this out. But what we look at is website first, just like anything. If you air a TV spot, whether it's in Hulu or whether it's in TV, it's still a screen, so it's still TraDigital. No matter what you do there, is if somebody is wanting to learn more information right then and there, you have this.
It's already out, probably.
It is already out, especially during that time. And 77% of people, I could be getting that percentage wrong, but 77% of people, no, it's actually higher. 87% of people that have this device while watching television, if they want to see something, it's all about instant gratification. They're going to go look it up, right? And so the worst thing you can do is, you're spending tons of money on what we call top of the funnel, which would be Hulu, which would be the Pandora, radio, television, and then you're bringing them into just a horrible experience.
Right. You've created awareness. You've created an action, and all of a sudden, it's like they walk into your physical look. It's as if they walked into your physical location. They're like, "There's nobody here to just see what I need.
The floor is dirty.
A salesperson is not, coming to talk to me. I might as well walk out and go to the person across the street."
Yeah, and bad location. I mean, just think about it. And some people that own these companies that come to us are way too close to their own company. And so I always try to tell them, like equipment or ag dealers, take your mindset off of what you think, how people search, because we will get into that data later on.
Right.
But think of yourself of searching for the next television or the next truck, whether that's Ram, Chevy, or Ford. Are you loyal to one brand, or are you actually going between the brands? And then once you get their mindsets into something else other than their industry, because they're way too close to it, then they can actually start to see, and they go, "Oh my gosh, yes, I do read reviews on the televisions. Oh my gosh, I do cross-brand and YouTube Ford versus Ram, and I do those things." And then they start to open their eyes, and then you can have the discussion: is your website mobile first? If you're going to be mobile first is key to everything anyway. I mean, in all of our stats with all of our websites, and I don't even know how many websites we have in total, but I would be almost glad to 90, 100, 167. With all of those aggregated together, it's all mobile. I shouldn't say all mobile, but the highest percentage is mobile. So you got to make sure your website is mobile first. And then you got to make sure, like with an equipment dealer, that the equipment is integrated into the website, instead of, because on a smartphone, if you click on something and you're on a website and it is mobile first, but you click on something and then it opens up that new window, and so it goes back and then forward, like in Safari or Chrome.
We're in a different browser window.
Yes, right. It does a huge motion, and that motion makes people feel very uncomfortable, very unsafe.
Where are you sending me?
Exactly. Have you ever seen Amazon do that? No. It's all contained, and they do that for a reason. And so we got to make sure of that. We got to make sure that the dealer's treating the website as an additional location that is their primary location, right? Then we got to make sure that underneath the hood they have the Google Analytics for us to actually go in and look at.
Right.
And what we're talking about with Google Analytics is it's free, number one. Number two is it gives great insight and details of what your consumers are in the habits for. So let's say they love home improvement, but it might be equipment dealers.
Right.
Well, every location is different. The East Coast and the West Coast is much different than Texas, and et cetera.
Right.
So if you know that they're in home improvement, that could lead to an HDTV
spot, right?
Yeah.
We know that, and that's location by location. I think that's why you mentioned, that when people ask you, how much do I need to put into, the TV budget versus the digital budget, it's like, well, it's going to be different. Here, in this, county, a lot of home improvement, watchers. So we're going to put
be county by county.
Yeah, so we'll put a little bit more in, traditional cable TV, buys, but in 3 counties over, a lot more, folks watching stuff on Netflix because they have probably better broadband or for whatever reason.
Well, and then just going down the list, because we don't want to stay on there forever, but we also look at the CRM, which is a customer relationship management tool, to see A, if they have one, B, if they're utilizing it, C, how are they capturing leads, D, if they have the past customers in it that then we could take zip codes from and see where they're penetrating the most in counties or zip codes. Market share, if the how the dealer's doing on a market share level by individual tractors in individual counties, right? And then that is data that then determines a county by county strategy, right, in a TraDigital atmosphere. So if you have one county where we're just really tanking it, then you could do additional layers. So what we say in the TraDigital world is, you could do 7 layers of tactics versus one county doing 2 layers of tactics just because they're doing really well in that other county, and you don't need to spend the money in that other county. And all of this is based on, just to make sure, is an article that always gets repeated and retweeted and then re-forwarded on Facebook, all this stuff that it was an old study, but I think it still applies, is, and I'm going to get the language wrong, and Pittman's going to correct me, or probably Grace, but is, I know that my marketing works, but I don't know the 50% of it, or what is...
I don't know which part is working. I know something's working. Which part?
Yeah.
How are we measuring that?
How are we measuring that? And that's what we try to the nth degree, is to measure that, and that's where we go by the county by county data. And then we go through, but we have a system and a process here that's called Doppio by Team SI, which is completely machine learning, and then it's also tied to our human optimization people in our team that goes through and looks at the potential for each county of selling equipment or agriculture equipment or American train,
or filling restaurant seats even.
Yeah, that one too. I mean, seriously, everything. So, but the data is all there, and it's nothing scary. It's nothing like Cambridge Analytics. This is all third-party data that has public information, just like your Pulaski, or excuse me, where we are, Pulaski County, has a website you can go on to, and you can literally look at who owns this piece of land and how many acres this piece of land has and how long the ownership is. All that stuff is public data. It's out there. And so we just utilize that to then be able to map them out. And then we also look at third-party data all the time of seeing county by county of how their competitors are trending in the market. And then we look at the video assets, because in anything, and you know this, if you're in Home Depot, I have to give them a lot of credit. Long time ago, and this is when I purchased a lot of their stock, was they came out with a huge video strategy of saying, I think it was 2011 or 2012 or 2010, I get mixed up on the dates, but they came out with a huge YouTube series, and they're still doing it, of like how to do it. And so like how to refinish your deck.
Yeah, how to put in a platform garden in your backyard. I think they embrace the whole DIYers that flocked to YouTube. Initially it became this great platform for DIYers, and they saw that and they took advantage of it because that's where their customers were.
Yes,
these are people that needed equipment.
Even if you're going to refinish your deck, well, don't you have to buy the product still? You can't just make that in your sink. No. So I mean, I guess you could blow up, but the whole thing is that that Home Depot embraced that, and then so they said, oh, well then I need to go to Home Depot and buy the product. So I loved it, friggin' loved it. And so a lot of our dealers, because we're just giving an example of agriculture and equipment today, but there's so many other industries where this applies, where you will literally see Google searches and video in YouTube, Kubota versus Deere, or whatever that may be. And if you're ranking with video series inside of that, if you're the voice and providing that information, the true information and legitimate information, then it builds that relationship. And so we always look at the video assets. And then one thing is we look at the store location. So we always look at store locations to see if it's if they're hard to find, or if they're scattered, or how they're doing in a online business directory. See if you click on the directions and it leads you out to BFE and not to the location. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Or and a lot of folks have so much trouble with that because there are so many directories and they don't know where to start. And the minute they try to change one, somebody else changes another. They might have an employee at this location thinking, "Oh, that's my job," or "I'm going to take the initiative," and it's just a mess. And people don't see that necessarily as a clear strategy and something that needs to be tamed as part of this TraDigital strategy.
But after you claim these locations in these directories and you start mapping out that data, then you'll be able to see if people are just finding it hard to get to a location. So if they're finding it hard to get to a location, like Karen at one of our equipment dealers, set up billboards around that location to say, turn here, turn here. There's just so much stuff that you can do with data that people just aren't utilizing. So all of that being said, then you look at organic strength. So then we go through a process, and this is before we even give them a TraDigital proposal. But example is if they're out there advertising combines, or they're advertising the small series or the small ag equipment, people don't necessarily Google just because you Googled, just because you advertised your brand name, local dealership, the manufacturer. They don't brand those two things. They're going to think of, that a specific series that you mentioned. They're going to think about the competitor when you're talking about yourself.
Right, a lot of versus searches.
Yeah. So think about on the organic side, what we do is, look at the organic strength and say, okay, if I'm going to be Googling that product, where does the dealership show up? If I'm going to Google the competitor and the competitor model, where do we show up? That kind of stuff. Because we don't just Google Progressive Insurance anymore. When we see a Progressive Insurance and Flow on TV, we could think about Geico. We could think about the other ones that are out there.
Right. Because
it's all about raising awareness of insurance. It's not necessarily raising the interest of the brand in today's world. So you got to be careful of that. And then the last part is just making sure that everyone is set up to handle the leads properly. Because this is a big thing. So, we're the ones who are told to bring leads, but we want to make sure that the leads are actually being taken care of, they're being processed correctly, there's not some random 2-minute long phone tree or whatever. You understand what I'm talking about?
That people, if I think we had a client a few years ago that we had created this kind of conquesting campaign around, where folks were searching for their competitor. We had, an ad specifically targeted to, put their phone number in front of these competitor searches.
Dare to compare.
Dare to compare, and so somebody would call, and sometimes they get mixed up saying, "Is this, the competitor?" And you've got, somebody that was going to go to your competitor, and you've got them in your hand, and instead of saying, "Hey, no, we're not, but we have the same stuff, and we have better stuff and better prices," they're like, "No, that's not us. You have the wrong number."
Yeah, and then hang up.
Yeah.
So you had a really potential good lead in your hands. So we make sure all of that is done. The whole point of that is there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 things that we go through on agriculture and equipment to determine the data that's needed to even build out the TraDigital plan. And then once we do that, it takes about 600 hours, which is on average of doing that with all the different departments and stuff. And then we present it to the dealer on a TraDigital aspect. And then a lot of our, like what you said, a lot of our dealers may think, oh, I'm going to get a digital proposal, but then see radio per counties, you know, from Patrick. And the reason for that is because the counties that were hurting so bad, we need top of the funnel awareness. And so top of the funnel awareness is going to be those large broadcast entities.
Right.
So
that are then going to drive awareness, which then drives people to search, and then search drives them back to the website, and that's where you capture the lead or make the phone call.
That's the full circle.
Yeah.
And the other thing though is data changes all the time. So when you look at, you know, over 90 days and then you search, you know, then you look at the past 30 days, it's constantly different. So the process here is to not only look at it once and then to draw up the plan, but to constantly looking at each one of those steps to ensure that that the plan is still driving what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Because we can turn on a dime as consumers, turn on a dime of what we do, what we're used to doing, you know, what we start Googling on our smartphones, etc. So that stuff is always changing, so that's why our teams are constantly looking at those platforms.
I like to use a metaphor with some of my clients when I'm describing, you know, the kind of constant optimization, the constant changing, the changing nature of the data. It's, you know, you don't buy back when people bought GPS units before they just relied on their phones, you didn't just buy one and set it up and, you know, expect it not to update.
Right.
So the roads are going to change.
Yeah.
You know, directions are going to change, new stuff's going to pop up, and so not, you know, setting it and forgetting it, not listening to the data on a, you know, monthly, weekly level is going to eventually drive you into a pond.
Yeah, and that's what we do on the equipment side. Is just literally every single week their entire team meets and talks about the data, and figure out where to improve or to back off or to, you know, because sometimes there are areas where they will say, okay, maybe we need to back off here because we're doing really well, and then pour this money into this another county that could use a little bit more gas.
Yeah.
So it's constantly changing, but that's on a weekly basis. So that's the TraDigital philosophy, and you know, TraDigital is and you heard we didn't even talk about percentages at the very end because we didn't specifically say a client or give an example because that would take 600 hours to talk about. But we basically break it down into video, audio, search, and visual. So visual would be a billboard, visual would be display, visual would be website stuff. Search is probably the duh factor.
Yeah.
Audio could be Spotify, Pandora, or FM or AM, depending on the data. Video could be your Hulu, your pre-rolls, your broadcast, your cable. Video is video, and that's not going anywhere. That's continuously growing.
Yeah.
And that's something that we have to navigate, but the only way you navigate that is through the data. And no market is the same. So I just want to be very cognizant of this. If you're watching this and you may say, oh, well, I'll just call one of their clients that's 2 states away that I know very well, their marketing director, and ask what they're doing. The thing is, 2 states away, that's a long ways away. And the whole data is going to change, and then the whole data is going to change, and the whole entire marketing plan is going to change.
Yeah.
We don't have one marketing plan that is exactly the same for those 500.
We live in a nation of regions and regionalism and just and markets and regional markets. So
we all think differently. So that's the process of it. Grace, is there any questions right now?
You've got shout outs from Angel Scout. She says hi, and then Shirley says,
Angel.
when are we getting together?
I love it. Okay, well, if there are any questions or anything, just please leave them, and Grace will be looking at that stuff later on, and this will be a podcast along with a blog, etc., that could help you navigate and then also help you understand how we process everything here at Team SI, but of course not giving away our secret sauce to our competitors because that's important. But a lot of it is data driven, and a lot of people just don't have time or the expertise on the data side, which I really give credit to, you know, everyone that's behind us to, you know, particularly Kansas to, you wherever to Austin that understands that and that lives in that data world, because that's so important. So,
well, thank you for your time today. Thank you for joining us for the Midday Roast.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for viewing. Please share with your friends. Please subscribe to the podcast. You can find it wherever podcasts are found, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, I think. Not yet. Okay. But you can definitely find it at the iTunes store.
Yeah.
And thank you again for tuning in to TMSI's Midday Roast.
thank you.
Have a great day.